The time is 10:28 hours. The morning's initial combat near La Val d'Almont has been lively, yet for all practical purposes constitutes nothing more than a preliminary skirmish. For Company B and Kampf Group Eckel alike, the true test of their combat mettle and tactical skill is yet to be determined. Falling back from Point Amos, the German scout team has succeeded in their bid to put distance and a small hill between themselves and 3rd Platoon. However, their escape from the East Bluff is far from complete. Several members of 1st Platoon spot their dramatic flight. From their position along the left flank of Hill 146, the GIs begin to take long-range pot shots at these two lone figures. It is at this moment that Lieutenant Eckel is provided with his first hard evidence as to the developments beyond the Veil and the condition of his Overwatch detachment.
Von meinem Gefechtstand bezeugte ich ein Paar von Soldaten, die unten den Hang laufen lassen, für ihre Leben fliehend.
From my command post, I witnessed a pair of soldiers racing down the slope, fleeing for their lives. Only 2 men. No more. They were out in the open, making for the northeast crop field. It was then that they came under fire from Hill 146. However, the range was so great for the small arms being leveled at them that they managed to escape to the wheat-strewn field without any apparent injury. Although the bulk of our force was still concealed from the enemy, the realization that our MG-42 had been silenced, combined with the likelihood that the East Bluff had fallen into enemy hands, was a little disconcerting. Albeit, not unexpected.
North of the Veil, the total lack of enemy counterfire from Point Amos is a welcome respite for the Americans along Route D54. This transitory break in the action allows them to finally render some much-needed aid to the numerous wounded GIs lying alongside the roadway. On the other hand, 3rd Platoon is now officially behind schedule in meeting their objective. His patience waning, Dorn radios his executive officer to get the show on the road. Their delay in securing the East Bluff is hindering the pace of the entire battle plan. Consequently, Campbell and his team take up position along the right flank of the assault in order to prod the platoon commander into a more expeditious execution of the advance. At this same time, Campbell signals the armed scout jeep to begin moving towards the crest of Point Amos. The intent is to gain a defilade position that will allow the jeep to both reconnoiter the bluff for any remaining enemy soldiers, as well as provide covering fire for the assault. Once the jeep rolls into position, 3rd Platoon commences its assault in force. Each of the 3 squads begin conducting a team-by-team mutual support leapfrogging action. Their approach towards the crest of Point Amos, albeit quick-paced, is vigilant. They are poised and ready for action. However, the bluff remains unresponsive. Within a matter of moments, the platoon overruns the enemy's Overwatch positions located along the northern ridge. A trio of inanimate soldiers are the only Germans present to greet them. The objective is secure. For 3rd Platoon, a panoramic view of the entire Veil is now only meters away, just beyond the rise.
Enemy contact.
As for the displaced MG-34 crew atop Point Andy, leaving the relative safety of their foxholes for the tree line proves costly. In an attempt to re-engage Hill 146, the ammo feeder meets his ultimate demise, this time at the hands of Company B's inexperienced and only sniper. Likewise, a soldier hidden within one of the many entrenchments of Kampf Group Eckel's left flank contingent becomes a collateral casualty during the hail of bullets intended for the machine gun team. The MG-34 crew once again takes to its heels, this time in full withdrawal. Along the right flank of Hill 146, the 30 caliber machine gun has redeployed and is now ready to provide covering fire for the pending advance. The brief lull in the firefight allows the Americans at this location to perform their own casualty assessments and attend to the wounded. Ultimately, the German heavy machine guns and armor were only moderately successful in their attacks on Hill 146. The main body of Company B is still intact and preparing to move out. Meanwhile, the harried yet fortunate German scouts stumble their way through the northeast wheat field on the last leg of their jaunt to a fallback position located just outside the hamlet. Completely exhausted, the men traverse the last few meters to their destination with subdued elation. The Americans have ceased their harassing fire. Upon arrival, the team leader signals intelligence information to Eckel regarding the enemy force composition north of the Vale. Their task complete, they abruptly collapse into their new subsurface home. About this same time, the first indirect spotting round is let loose from one of the captured 81mm mortars. Its target, Hill 146.
Die Mörsermannschaften aus der Gesichtslinie.
In order to keep the mortar crews out of the enemy's line of sight behind my command post, I had to direct their fire myself, by way of voice commands. I was mildly surprised, and very proud of the stragglers. Their very first round actually impacted on the target hill.
Despite missing its intended mark, the high explosive strikes within yards of the recently redeployed machine gun, causing multiple wounds and one casualty. Within seconds, a subsequent spotting round is on its way. However, this time, the shell falls harmlessly to earth, well outside the field of vision of the command post. Attempting to interpret Eckel's directional commands is proving difficult for the stragglers. The single active mortar crew struggles to find the correct trajectory. To the southwest of the hamlet, yet another event is occurring. Having lost 2 team members plus the advantage of an effective field of fire for their gun, the dislodged MG-34 crew has transitioned to the backside of Point Andy and is now racing across the Vale in an attempt to relocate to Almont. Captain Dorn observes this deliberate venture from his vantage point atop Hill 146.
My attention was brought to bear on the 3 enemy soldiers scampering across the Vale, between Point Andy and Almont. They were in plain view of my troops, who were not dissuaded from engaging them, despite the extreme range. It was obvious that these men comprised the remnants of the 2nd Heavy Machine Gun crew, and that they were intent on redeploying their weapon for action once again. I believe this was the primary motivation as to why my men engaged the small group, not necessarily out of revenge or for the sport of it. It was no turkey shoot.
Although a considerable number of rounds are placed downrange, the Germans managed to reach the cover of the hamlet unscathed, with one exception. Only meters from safety, the trailing member of the crew is struck by a lone slug. He collapses to the ground, spilling his canister laden with machine gun belt ammunition. In an effort to catch their breath after such an ordeal, the 2 surviving members of the machine gun team dive for cover behind a field house, completely oblivious to the fate of their comrade. When they finally realize that they have lost yet another man, plus half of their gun's remaining ammunition supply, these men temporarily panic and bolt towards the sunken Vale and away from the fight. In order to gain a better overall view of the battlefield, Captain Dorn and his team elect to reposition themselves to the apex of Hill 146, in spite of the fact that this will expose them to direct enemy fire.
My XO informed me, by radio, that several 81mm mortars were missing from the artillery convoy. It was obvious that the enemy had absconded with them and were now using our own weapons against us. Additional casualties were inevitable. Therefore, I had to act immediately. My own safety was of no consequence. It was imperative that I locate the enemy's firing positions and personally direct counter-fire against them utilizing our own mortars.
As if vindicating Dorn's decision to put himself in harm's way, the stragglers launched yet another spotting round in the general direction of he and his men. The mortar impacts short and wide of the hill. No damage is done. On the other hand, it's only a matter of time before the Germans find the range and begin laying down a multi-tube barrage onto the concentration of GIs atop Hill 146. Behind the farmstead, a confounded Lieutenant Spitzer witnesses the southward flight of the battered heavy machine gun crew as they dart past his concealed position near the eastern barn. He verbally engages the two men from his Stug and manages to rally their spirits. With renewed vigor, the crew does an about-face and cautiously heads back towards the hamlet and the pending cauldron of fire. Their destination? The very same foxholes playing host to the relocated scouts. About this same time, 3rd Platoon begins to crest Point Amos. The 3 squads disperse in order to establish a skirmish line across the ridge. With the East Bluff now devoid of enemy activity, Campbell and his team also advance onto the hill. Securing Point Amos pays immediate dividends for the Americans. With an unobstructed view of the Vale, Campbell and 3rd Platoon detect 2 instances of enemy activity in the vicinity of the farmstead, which are both outside the field of vision of the main body of Company B on Hill 146. These are the MG-34 crew maneuvering forward along the eastern flank of the hamlet, as well as a small group of men operating what appears to be American-made 81mm mortars from within the center courtyard. The GIs quickly prepare to engage these targets. Conversely, Lieutenant Eckel catches his first glimpse of the US presence on Point Amos.
Es war nur eine Frage der Zeit, bevor die Amerikaner über die Bewachungsposition auf der Osttäuschung gewannen.
It was only a matter of time before the Americans gained an overwatch position on the East Bluff. In so doing, the mortar crews were left with very few options in which to operate from cover. It was now more imperative than ever that we employ all 4 tubes and attempt to reduce the enemy's numbers before they began their attack. As a result, I ordered the stragglers to redeploy for independent action, since indirect fire control was proving to be ineffective.
Fortunately for the MG-34 crew, the race to redeploy their weapon before the troops atop Point Amos could bring combined firepower to bear on them was realized. With bullets dancing all around them, the crew successfully negotiates their way to the northeast crop field and safely enters the entrenchments. Without delay, the pair proceed to reassemble their gun and tripod for action. Although 3rd Platoon was unable to effectively engage the exposed MG crew, they are not dismayed. Other targets of opportunity are within their sights. Despite being only partially deployed, the GIs waste no time in letting loose with long-range fire onto the Almont courtyard, which discourages the stragglers from pursuing any further action against Hill 146. Simultaneously, the scout jeep begins to recross the bluff in order to take up position at the apex of the dirt road leading into the Vale. However, the MG-34 spots this movement and commences tracking them. Seconds later, a burst of fire is on its way uprange, raking the vehicle with hot lead. The driver is obliged to take evasive action in order to escape the incoming fire. Although the Jeep sustains minor mechanical damage, the crew's remarkable streak of luck is still intact. Having consolidated its positions, Company B is now committed for action. To this point in the engagement, the Americans have suffered 8 casualties, the Germans 15. However, the Battle of Almont is only just beginning. You're watching Tales of Virtual Combat on His Story International.